Hi folks, I'm here with Verge. I'm on my 10-acre permaculture homestead here in Eastern Ontario, and today I'm going to be demonstrating to you how we go about milking our dairy cow, Gertrude. So we just headed to the barn and we're getting ready for milking, and I thought now would be a great opportunity to give you guys a video tour of our really low-tech hand milking setup for our single milk cow, Gertrude. So we've got Gertrude right over here, and then just to the right, we've got our milking stanchion or head gate. Now we're standing inside of our approximately 15 feet by 30 foot pole barn that we built out of hemlock timbers and milled hemlock lumber. And so the offcuts of that hemlock, the slabs, were used in a lot of the construction that we have here on the farm. So what we have is a head gate right over here. And so when Gertrude's ready, you're gonna see her bolt for this head gate and get access to her grain, which I'll show you in a second. But all this does is it opens and closes. And so we can close it on her neck. She's very comfortable while she eats her grain. And then you'll see on the other side that we have a little stick, a little key that we pop through this hole, and that'll stop this piece of wood from coming out. It's really, really simple, very, very low tech. Everything built out of hemlock and cedar, in this case, cedar slabs from offcuts from our local mill. So just heading over to the other side of our little wall here, our little half wall, we've got our feeding trough. And so this was built out of old cedar pieces as well, cedar fence pieces or offcuts of cedar pieces that weren't long enough for use as fencing. And so we have a really simple variation of what we call a kiwi brace. So a kiwi brace is essentially using rocks and wire, fencing wire, to apply tension in order to create a brace, typically for fencing. We applied a bit of a variation on that. It's called a kiwi brace because, as you would expect, it's originated in New Zealand. So we have this really simple setup here, which while Gertrude is in the milking stanchion, she actually applies a bit of pressure. So she applies a bit of weight to the wall. So as she's feeding on this, on the grain that we put in here, she's actually applying pressure to the wall, and she's not, breaking the wall as she moves as a large animal. So we keep a really simple cover, an old tote bin cover on here, to make sure the chickens don't poop in the bucket here. And you'll notice a little hole here. We had a rat problem earlier on, and the rats were digging through that to get access to any leftover grain. Overall, we don't mind if they eat grain that spills on the ground, but of course we want to keep them out of our grain and out of here, because we don't want Gertrude to be licking up rat and mouse poop. So we need to be a little careful of that. We need to keep the chickens out of here as well. So really, really simple bottom, and she can lap that up while we milk her from the other side. We store her grain in these really simple buckets. I think we spent about $25 each on these. These are food grade barrels. I don't quite remember how much they hold in volume, but they're food grade, and they have a tight fitting lid. So they have threads and you can tighten the lid on there. I think they're typically used to ship things like olives and oil and other substances, maple syrup perhaps. So you can get them really cheap as a byproduct of the shipping industry. And we just store some really simple dairy ration in here. Now, we do intend to move to more of a dairy-free situation. No, excuse me, not a dairy-free situation. We do intend to move to more of a grain-free situation with our cow, but she was accustomed to grain when we purchased her. It's only our first year with a dairy cow, and so we just wanted to ensure that she can wean off of this stuff slowly. This is still a worthwhile investment, though, because we'll always have a need for some grain, likely, as we're milking, to keep her energy production up. We'd like that to be organic, non-GMO, and really locally sourced. So we're going to see what we can do about growing some of our own grains, but then we can add other things like duckweed and other nutrient-rich foods in there for her periodically throughout the day. Okay, so let me show you how we get Gertrude into this stall. You'll be surprised at how easy it actually is. So really simple. I'm going to try and do all of this with one hand. We have, ironically, a milk container that we no longer need because we have what is essentially an unlimited supply of milk. So we use it to scoop grain. And that's about all she gets per day. Currently, we're only milking once per day. As the pasture season has essentially disappeared, she's being hay fed. We want to give her as much of a break as possible. So that'll be our first step towards drying her off essentially before she calves, will be to milk her once a day. And we're fine with that. We get about 1.5 gallons or so per day at the moment. And we're very happy to be getting that in the middle of December. Okay, a little bit of grain in there. Got this thing opened. Let's go bring Gertrude into the stanchion. Hey girl, ready to rock? Whew, that was a tough job. Okay, so we've got our key, which is essentially a stick with some bale twine. We're gonna close this up. All right, pretty difficult to do with one hand. Maybe if I use my elbow. We'll stick that in the hole. All we have to do is make sure it comes out the other side. There it is. And that's it. She can't get out now, unless I say so. But she's still got plenty of room. So she's very comfortable as she eats her grain. And when she's done her grain, because she'll be done that by far before we're done milking her, and we don't necessarily want to give her more grain, she'll just sit in a sort of meditative fashion and chew her cud while we very quietly and meditatively, in our own sense, milk our cow. So the equipment that we use is really, really basic. There's no real specialized equipment except for maybe this squeezy bottle here. And so we use this. This is a non-return dip cup. And so we dip each one of her 4 teats into this dip cup, particularly at the end. And all we do is we add a little bit of vinegar and soapy water, and then we just splash that, and it doesn't return back into here, so the water always stays clean. We dump it out, and we do each individual teat, and then dry her off and apply a bit of udder cream, which is made as essentially a calendula salve, or when it's in season, a dandelion salve. And so that's really all we do in terms of teat care. What we have here is an upcycled salt container, so we buy kilograms of salt at a time. So we use those containers to store some things. This bucket here is just a cleaning bucket. It's an upcycled salt container, and so when I take off the lid, we carry it with the lid so we don't accidentally spill soapy water into our milking bucket. A little awkward to do this with one hand. And all we do is we bring out some warm soapy water with some cloths that we'll use to wash our teats and our udder and the area around to make sure that there's no contamination or drippings or anything into the milk as we're milking. Although a little bit of dirt, a little bit of hair gets in, and that's okay, because we filter that when we get into the kitchen. So what we'll do is we'll milk directly into this bucket. This is our drying towel that we'll use to dry her, so we don't put that in the water. But we'll milk using this bucket, and then periodically we'll dump this bucket into this one, which is just a pail that's used to ferment wine, an upcycled pail. So again, food grade, but it has a really nice tight fitting lid. And so what that allows us to do is by periodically dumping the milk from this one into this one, we prevent a total loss should the cow kick the bucket, literally. The other thing that we keep on hand are these combs. So we have a curry comb here that is often used for horse care. And then we have a very simple brush here that we'll use to brush her down before we get started. Okay, so if your hand fits, and my hand is a little too big to do this with the rear teats, but I can do this with the front ones. The ideal way to milk is actually to do it sort of like you're squeezing a tube of toothpaste. So you're starting at the top, and you're sort of squeezing with your thumb and your forefinger, and then you're sort of running a scale on a piano or something. And so, hard to demonstrate here with a camera. Let's try. As you can see, my hand is just barely big enough to be able to do this with the front teats, and I absolutely cannot do that with the back teats. Now, a milkmaid's hands are actually, they would define a good milkmaid's hand by having a small, strong hand so that you can fit firmly around the teat. My hand is, I would say, fairly strong, but certainly not small. And so the way that I have to milk teats, perhaps you're milking a goat or worse yet, a sheep, or you just have a couple of small teats like this, the way that you're going to milk that is just using your thumb and your forefinger, and sometimes both your middle and your forefinger. Oh, careful, girl. And you're going to sort of wrap around, and you're just going to squeeze that out from the top. Now, you want to follow through all the way to the end, because when you get to the end, if you don't follow through all the way to the end, you're going to get a bit of pooling or bubbling up here at the tip, and you're going to cause infections like mastitis. You always want to follow through from the top to the bottom. So what I'll do here whenever I'm milking is I'll milk the front two. So usually, of course, I'm using both my hands when I'm holding a camera with the other. I'll milk the front two halfway. So I'll milk 50% out of these 2 quarters. and then I'll move over to the 2 back quarters and I'll milk these out 50%. I'll return back to the front ones and I'll finish off as much as I can, and then I'll move to the back and I'll do the same thing, and then I'll move through each individual quarter with one hand and just squeeze out as much as I possibly can. The reason I do that is because a cow works on supply and demand. If I reduce the demand or the yield that I'm seeking out of these teats, her production will drop subsequently. Now, sometimes this is desired, certainly when I'm drying her off to give her a break before she calves, usually at least 3 months, although we'd like to give, our ideal would be to give her 6 months. So we're milking her for half the year when the pasture is lush, and the other half she's allowed to just take a break and be pregnant, so that we can start the cycle again. A cow's gestation period is 9 months, same as a human being, so there's a bit of a rotational or seasonality to milk here, if that's what we want to do, and so we're really just giving her a break in between pregnancies. Okay, so again, what we're doing here is we're milking with one hand, and we'll milk out all the way. And now you know you're doing a good job if there's some foam at the bottom of the bucket. So if you're getting enough pressure, or at the top of the bucket rather, you'll get a little foam there. So the next step is to filter and cool the milk as quickly as possible, and we'll let it sit in the fridge for 24 hours, and we'll be able to separate the cream from the skim, and we can make butter with that. Hopefully you found some value out of that. Now, if you want to connect with other permies who are milking cows, goats, sheep, or even zebus, visit our free Permaculture Academy community. We'll put the link to that in the show notes below. All you need to do is create an account, and you'll be able to connect with all sorts of awesome people for free.
Wanna see myself as a part of the whole. Grow some food for my family food bowl. Stand my ground but give up control. Know the boundaries but tear down all the